But I would love it if the industry rediscovered statistical AI and machine learning, because those models work really well in specific business contexts for structured business processes.
Welcome to episode 51 of It's About Data. This episode is a continuation of our conversation with Andrew Brust from episode 50. Our topic today is AI agents, hype versus reality.
Okay, well, Andrew, good to see you here again. We just had a rather interesting conversation about Microsoft Fabric IQ. And we ended on sort of, I won't call it a dissonant note, but we kind of ended on a note of like, well, what about what's been lurking in the background about agents? But also, I think, when you're talking about any of this, I think there's a lot which is involved with like the expectations around AI. And so at this point, I'm going to give you an opening shot here, and then we're just going to take it from, we're going to see where the heck you're going to go with this.
Wow. No guardrails there.
Absolutely none.
Freeform, pet peeves, just go for it.
Exactly.
I feel like an
It's your chance to get it off your shoulder.
I feel like an ungoverned large language model. That's another pet peeve we can talk about. But yeah, the world of AI is a tough one to crack, because most things in my career as an analyst, either things are very hype driven or they're very substantive. AI is weird because it's both. I still think the signal to noise ratio is low, but that doesn't mean that the signal is unimportant. It's very important. It is, in fact, it's changing everything and not just our industry. But in order to get to that, we really have to weed out a bunch of noise. So that brings us to the topic of agents, which in and of itself has a ton of noise. The very word, the very term is a pretty hype-driven thing. But that's not to say there's nothing there, right? Agents are an important evolution of both event-driven software and AI kind of put together, with a somewhat aspirational idea that those things really do come together, and AI, rather than just answering questions, can actually do things for you on your behalf or on the organization's behalf, where it has agency, hence the name. But to get to that point, the AI is going to need to have an awful lot of context. It's got to be safely managed away from, common hallucinations. It's got to be very well bounded. And either those decisions are just going to have to be recommendations that humans in the loop will review and approve, or laugh out of the room, depending on the quality of the technology. If we're going to delegate power to the agents and the LLMs, they kind of need to get an awful lot better at understanding all of the context and all of the boundaries in the business, across its data estate and across the events that take place in it. And yes, we were talking about Fabric IQ, and I think there's elements in Fabric IQ and elements in other major data platforms that are helping there.
Well, so I don't know if you know Lak Lakshmanan, but he's like a kind of a luminary from the tech Silicon Valley world, worked for Google for a long time, comes out of climate and weather modeling and machine learning. And he was on our show recently, and we actually just published his episode, and one of the things he pointed out is that in many respects, we've been doing agency for a long time. For example, is like high-speed trading. We give these algorithms full control to make essentially billions of dollars worth of decisions. And so it's always about what decisions are they allowed to make, what guardrails are around those. And I think the problem with the hype cycle right now is that many of the pumpers on this stuff are not putting any guardrails around anything. It's just like take an LLM, deploy it as an agent, don't have any traditional algorithmic or software controls around what it can do. And that is a recipe for disaster. And that risks undermining the potential of this technology. And you really have to look at what we've done before that's been successful to figure out how to make this work in the future.
Agreed. There's a very dangerous thing happening, which is that we are suspending disbelief at scale. Yes, we've had agentic lowercase a agentic things for a long time, but they've been based on rules engines
Mm-hmm.
or maybe statistical machine learning models, i.e., they've been based on deterministic computing.
Yes.
And large language models are non-deterministic. And while that gives us a kind of great fuzzy logic power that we didn't have before that can blow you away in a demo, the idea of entrusting your business or business decisions or processes to something that's non-deterministic, nobody's thinking through the ramification of that, which is that you're delegating to something that may or may not do the right thing.
Right.
Which
and there's
is,
no accountability, right? It's just a statistical model. You can't punish it, right? If it does something bad.
well, that's right. And, the issue is that, gosh, people aren't thinking through the costs of that and the mitigations of that. And ultimately, what that means is that these things are great pilots, but they don't tend to get deployed, which is, a plague in the industry right now, because ultimately to really delegate, well, you either have to be tolerant of huge margins of error, or you have to say, well, I'll delegate this agent, but I'm not going to let it do things by itself. I'm just going to let it make recommendations that I, as a human in the loop, will review. And the costs of doing that are huge, and they're not really getting budgeted into um, the spend and the pilot projects to understand when the ROI is going to come from these AI deployments, because this doesn't need to be a hidden cost, but people are willfully hiding it by not thinking through the ramifications and and also nobody's really governing these things. We realize we should govern data, and we realize we should govern users and manage their permissions, but we talk about these agents as if they're super users and they're accessing data everywhere, and we don't talk about governing them, which is irrational to the nth degree.
Well,
So,
what's one of the interesting things which came out, and actually this was at AWS reInvent, was basically some new capabilities in Agent Core. And it was basically, it was kind of like an observability, it was kind of like putting some observability to look at the behavior of your agents. But essentially what I'm doing, I'm sort of wondering if this is what you're working towards, is that around these non-deterministic agents, that we need to put some determinism around it, kind of like, I mean, not guardrails, but actually controls. What's your take on that?
I mean, I don't even know why we're debating it. So I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to have, I don't know, agents that in effect have identities in systems without governing those identities. And what makes it even trickier is humans are, we have role-based access controls. That's a pretty broad industry standard. And that's because most users kind of are usually in one role or another, or some set of roles. The weird thing about agents is we're saying, depending on things that are completely circumstantial, they may be in different roles at different times. So actually governing them is even more complicated. And in addition to having role-based access controls, we should also have attribute-based access controls, and we should also have purpose-based access controls. And honestly, the science of doing all that is, we're not there yet, right? There's a lot of marketing speak around all of that. There is some implementation in the data access governance world, but I don't. I've been to analyst days that have been given by certain data platform companies that I won't mention. But I brought up the question at one of them and said, "Well, what are you guys doing to govern the agents? You seem so jazzed about, rededicating your platform to them." And the answer basically came back as, "Well, we have full governance over the data." As if by itself that's sufficient, and it's not. I mean, it's critical. It's a prerequisite, but it's not the whole bill of goods. Not even close. So look, I mean, the industry does this where, like, if we thought through everything before we launched stuff, we'd never get everything launched.
Fair enough.
So we have to launch it, and then we have to see the errors in our ways, and then we kind of need to fix it, and then we need to try again. But more forethought would help, because otherwise what happens is the entire industry gets euphoric about certain things. Companies bring products to market, people get excited about it, and then there are huge problems with those products, and the whole market loses confidence in the category for quite a long time. And then we go back and try it again. And the inefficiencies in that cycle are massive. And it doesn't have to be like that. We're not going to get it perfect, but we can certainly game out a lot more of this before the products launch and go into general availability. But the way the funding machine works for these startups, and then the pressure to get a product to market and then get the ROI and get to an exit event, corrupts the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the danger here, I think what we're seeing is that AI pilots are basically de facto kind of under investor relations and marketing, honestly. Like they're a way to sell your company, right? We've seen this again and again. And we've seen this before. So the first iteration of Watson at IBM, part of the reason it failed is that it was this great research project, then it was put on jeopardy. And then, the investment to really make it work just maybe didn't materialize. So just like investors, this is amazing, and marketing, this is amazing, but it just did not actually deliver.
Matt, do you realize what you just said? They put this project on jeopardy. Did you mean to say they put it in jeopardy?
In jeopardy, yeah. Yeah, no, there's a P.T. Barnum aspect to a lot of this, right? Yeah. Sucker born every minute. And I feel like the industry has suckers born every minute where they think, well, this wave of tech is going to be different. And it's like, some things are just universal truths. Like, you need to be careful. And if you're not careful, you're going to have egg in your face. And it's going to turn a lot of people off. And then all this talk about AI being a bubble, like it's going to self-fulfill, because we're not being prudent about it. We're just,
I think there's some other reasons.
Enthusiastic about it.
There's some other, I think, very sort of resource related reasons for that, which is that in terms of the capital requirements, in terms of basically the natural resource requirements, that do basically that even, let's say that if everything that Sam Altman was predicting could come true, the fact is what it will take to get there. Will the industry be able to afford that? There's one last question I think we kind of like to look at it. And it's really around managing expectations, and we seem to be in this loop of as you say before, like minimum viable product, MVP, and also fear of missing out. But I'm also wondering if basically that we're going to start, if we'll be able to get to our senses before any type of bubble pops, which is like maybe looking at smaller is beautiful, and by that, looking at that there are companies like IBM that I think are really going down this path, and to their credit, which are really focusing on smaller, more precise models. Kind of like, I guess, sort of like rifle shots, if that's the best metaphor, as opposed to shotgun. And so I think when I finish up is like, what do you think would basically be the best way to essentially kind of manage expectations? I mean, yes, there is going to be we're going to have some peaks and valleys, but what do you think is going to be a way to kind of find a sustainable way to innovate through this?
Well, the smaller models, or the more kind of post-trained models, I think can help things a lot. I would also love it, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love it if the industry rediscovered statistical AI and machine learning, because those models work really well in specific business contexts for structured business processes. And the amount of compute resources and all the downstream stuff, like electricity, that they consume is so much smaller than what generative AI models will consume. It'd be neat if we saw some balance here. Machine learning and auto machine learning now have actually progressed to the point where they work really well. It's almost like we're done. And no sooner did we get done than we moved on to the next wave.
And forgot everything.
You don't, I mean, a lot of these models don't even need GPUs at all.
Yeah.
GPUs benefit them, but a lot of these are fine to use CPUs and run locally. But that's not going to be as sexy and exciting as using GPT-20. So I don't know. I think what could help is if industry and customers take inventory of what we already have and what works well, and implement that along with more experimental work and prudent implementation of the stuff that's more bleeding edge. And I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for that kind of enlightened approach, because I don't know. There's just too much pressure from the marketing and investor relations kinds of parties, and investors themselves, to make that sort of socially popular. But I do think that people who can sort of take a step back, take a deep breath, and impose that kind of discipline will be the successful people in this industry. I believe that strongly.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. And this whole area is an ongoing conversation, has been for several years and will be in the future. So hopefully we'll get to chat with you again sometime too.
It was great fun. Thank you.
Talk to you later.